I found my son at a gas station off I-70, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall and his bad leg stretched out in front of him. His lips had that grayish-blue color you see on people who've been in the cold too long. His jacket was soaked through. He was shivering so hard he could barely hold the paper cup of coffee the attendant had given him. He looked up when I walked in. He didn't say anything, neither did I. I just sat down on the floor next to him and put my arm around his shoulders. That was February 14th, 2024. Valentine's Day. My name is Leonard Pruitt. I'm 61 years old. I spent 30 years as a civil engineer in Colorado, building highway infrastructure, bridges, drainage systems. I retired 2 years ago. I live alone now. My wife Carol passed 6 years back, and it's been me and Nathan ever since. Nathan Pruitt is my son. He's 31 years old. He works as a medical technician at a hospital in Boulder. He's a good man, steady, patient, the kind of person who thinks before he speaks. 6 weeks before that night, he'd had surgery on his left knee, torn meniscus. The doctor had told him he'd need 2 more months of recovery before he could move without restriction. He could walk, but he couldn't run. He couldn't cover ground fast in the cold. He couldn't get out of the way of anything coming at him. The people who left him on that mountain highway knew all of that. I need to back up. Nathan had been engaged to a woman named Nadine Ashby for about 4 months. I'd met her family a handful of times. Her father was Gerald Ashby, owned a construction company in the Denver area. Her mother was Sylvia. Her brother Philip worked sales for the company. They had a big house in Cherry Hills. Gerald drove a new truck and wore the kind of watch that's meant to tell you something about the man wearing it. From the first time I met Gerald Ashby, something felt off. I couldn't name it. He was polite enough, asked the right questions. But there was something behind his eyes when he looked at Nathan that I didn't like. Not warmth, not curiosity. Something that felt more like calculation. Nathan told me I was reading too much into it. The first real warning sign came about 2 months after the engagement. Gerald presented Nathan with a prenuptial agreement. He said it was standard practice, that his family lawyer drafted it for all family marriages, that it was just about protecting both sides. Nathan brought it to me. I passed it to my brother-in-law Clifford Nolan, who spent 30 years as a civil litigator before he retired. Cliff read it in one sitting. He called me that evening. Page 4, paragraph 11, he said. After 12 months of marriage, Gerald Ashby, named as financial trustee of the Ashby Family Trust, gains co-signing authority over any joint investment account Nathan holds with Nadine. I asked him what that meant in plain terms. It means after 1 year, Gerald can access their shared money, not just see it, move it. Nathan refused to sign. Gerald pushed back, said Cliff was misreading the clause, that it was standard language. Nathan held firm. Gerald got quieter after that. More formal. The warmth, such as it was, dropped out of his voice when he spoke to Nathan at family dinners. 3 weeks before Valentine's Day, Gerald proposed the trip. A long weekend at a ski area near Breckenridge. He called it a bonding trip, a chance for Nathan to get to know the family better before the wedding. Nathan was hesitant. His knee was still in recovery. Gerald told him there'd be no skiing, just relaxing at the chalet, good food, mountain air. Nathan called me the night before they left. "Dad, I don't really want to go," he said. I told him to trust that feeling. He said Gerald had been making an effort lately, that he didn't want to create problems before the wedding. He said Nadine had asked him to try. I told him to call me when he got there. He never made it to the chalet. The call I got that night wasn't from Nathan, it was from Gerald Ashby, 9:47 p.m. Leonard, his voice was smooth, controlled, the voice of a man who is used to managing situations. "Nathan's fine, just want to give you a heads up. There was a little incident at a rest stop on 70. He got out of the car and we drove ahead a bit to give him some space. Just a joke. He's being a little dramatic about it. I asked him one question, where is my son right now? He's maybe a few minutes behind us on the highway. He'll walk it off." I hung up. I called Nathan's cell phone. No answer. Called again. No answer. Third time he picked up. "Dad." His voice was low, thin. "Nathan." "Where are you?" "Rest stop. I've been walking." A pause. "Dad, I can't move fast. My knee." There was a truck. I had to get to the shoulder, and I couldn't get there fast enough. "Are you off the road?" "There's a truck driver who stopped. I'm with him now. We're going to a gas station. Send me your location the second you have signal. I'm getting in the truck right now." I called Clifford Nolan on the way out the door. Cliff and I have stayed close since Carol's sister passed. He's 63, lives 20 minutes from me. He's one of the sharpest people I've ever known, and he does not rattle easily. I told him everything while I drove. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Go get Nathan. I'll start working." It took me 1 hour and 50 minutes to reach that gas station. Every mile of it felt longer than it was. The attendant's name was Stuart Waverly. He was maybe 25, working the night shift alone. He told me he'd been driving back from a delivery stop when he spotted Nathan on the shoulder of the highway, walking with a limp, no reflective gear, no real visibility in the dark. He'd pulled over without thinking about it. I almost didn't see him, Stuart said. The way he was moving, I could tell something was wrong with his leg. I thanked him. He waved it off and went back behind the counter. I sat down next to Nathan on the floor. We stayed like that for a few minutes without talking. He was still shivering. I kept my arm around his shoulders. "How long were you out there?" I asked. "I don't know exactly. Maybe an hour. My phone had no signal until we got close to the station." He looked at his coffee cup. They pulled into the rest stop and Gerald said to get out and look at the view. "There's a scenic overlook there." I got out. I heard the doors close. I thought they were getting out too. He stopped. Then the headlights came on and the car pulled back onto the highway. "Did you run?" I tried. He said it quietly. I couldn't. My knee locked up after about 20 yards. I was waving my arms. They didn't stop. I drove him to the emergency room in Frisco. Dr. Pauline Greer was the attending physician. She examined Nathan thoroughly and told me privately what she found: mild hypothermia, early stage. The surgery site on his knee had been re-stressed from the uneven terrain and the cold. Inflammation had set back his recovery by at least 2 to 3 weeks. He needed rest and monitoring overnight. She looked at me steadily when she said the next part. "Mr. Pruitt, in those temperatures on a highway with that kind of traffic speed, with his mobility limitation, another hour out there would have put him in serious danger. I want you to understand that." I understood it. Gerald Ashby showed up at the hospital around midnight. He came into the room with Sylvia behind him and Philip in the doorway. Gerald looked at Nathan in the hospital bed, then looked at me. He put on an expression that was meant to read as concern. "Leonard, we feel terrible about this. It got out of hand. That's not what any of us wanted." I stood up from the chair. I'm not a large man, but I'm not small either. 30 years of field work keeps you in a certain kind of shape even after you stop. "Get out of this room," I said. Gerald blinked. "I'm sorry. You heard me." He looked at Nathan. Nathan said nothing. He stared at the ceiling. Gerald straightened up. He was not a man who heard those words often. You could see it in the way he processed it, the small recalibration behind his eyes. Then he put his hands in his jacket pockets and walked out. Sylvia and Philip followed without a word. Cliff arrived at 7 the next morning. He came into the waiting room carrying 2 coffees and a folder. He sat across from me and opened it on the table between us. He had been working all night. "I called in a favor from someone I know in digital forensics," he said. "Colorado State Patrol has cameras on I-70. I pulled the footage logs through my contact." He laid out printed screenshots. Timestamp 8:14 p.m. The Ashby SUV entering the rest area. Timestamp 8:19 p.m. Nathan getting out of the vehicle, visible in the parking area lights. Timestamp 8:22 p.m. The SUV exits back onto the highway. Timestamp 8:23 p.m. Nathan visible near the guardrail moving toward the highway shoulder. Timestamp 9:11 p.m. Nathan visible walking along the shoulder, approximately 1.4 miles from the rest stop. They had left him there for nearly an hour. I picked up one of the coffees and held it without drinking it. "There's more," Cliff said. He put his phone on the table and turned it toward me. It showed a text message thread. He explained that his forensics contact had obtained it through proper legal channels as part of the preliminary inquiry he'd initiated the night before. The thread was from a group chat. The name at the top read, Ashby Family. The participants were Gerald, Sylvia, Philip, Nadine, and a name I recognized but hadn't expected. Howard Beckett. Cliff explained that Beckett was Gerald's brother-in-law and financial advisor, the man who managed the Ashby Family Trust. He had attended one family dinner I hadn't been at. Nathan had mentioned him once, described him as quiet and forgettable. I read through the messages. Gerald, he's still refusing to sign. This is becoming a real problem for the timeline. Sylvia, he needs a stronger push. Words aren't working. Philip, the trip is next weekend. Same approach we used with Brad Tanner. Gerald, yes. Once he's rattled, he'll sign anything or he'll walk. Either outcome works for us. Sylvia, make sure Nadine keeps him calm until we get up there. Don't let her tip him off. Howard Beckett, Gerald, just be careful. If this goes wrong, it's not just the deal. Gerald, it won't go wrong. It worked before. I read it twice. Then I set the phone down on the table. Who is Brad Tanner? I asked. Cliff already knew. He'd been on that too. Brad Tanner was a contractor from Fort Collins. 2 years earlier, he had entered into a business partnership with Philip Ashby on a commercial renovation project. Midway through the contract, Gerald had introduced a revised agreement that would have transferred a controlling share of Brad's portion of the business to the Ashby Company. Brad refused to sign. 2 weeks later, the Ashbys invited him on a hunting trip to a private cabin outside Steamboat Springs. They left him there in the middle of the night alone, 8 kilometers from the nearest town. In October temperatures, Brad walked out. He never told anyone what happened because Gerald had made it clear that any public statement would result in a lawsuit for breach of their business contract. Brad had stayed quiet for 2 years. Cliff had found him in one evening of phone calls. He'll give a recorded statement, Cliff told me. He's been waiting for a reason. I sat back in my chair and looked at the ceiling of the hospital waiting room for a moment. Tell me about the prenup again, I said. The real version? Cliff folded his hands on the table. Gerald's construction company has been carrying concealed debt. Based on the financial records I pulled through public filings and court documents, it's approximately $380,000 routed through a subsidiary to keep it off the primary books. Their refinancing on that debt comes due in 14 months. They needed a source of accessible funds, and the prenup gives them that. Page 4, paragraph 11. After 12 months of marriage, Gerald Ashby, as named trustee of the Ashby Family Trust, has co-signing authority on any joint investment account held by Nathan and Nadine. Nathan has a retirement account and 2 investment accounts combined. They're worth more than the debt. He paused. They weren't worried about protecting their daughter from a bad marriage. They were trying to use the marriage to plug a financial hole. I thought about all the dinners I'd sat through, Gerald passing the bread, asking Nathan about his job, laughing at the right moments, the watch on his wrist, the careful managed warmth of a man who needed something from you. I thought about Nathan telling me I was reading too much into it. When Nathan was discharged the next afternoon, I brought him to my house in Denver. He needed rest, and he wasn't going to get it in his apartment alone. I set him up in the guest room and told him to sleep. He slept most of the first 2 days. On the 3rd day, he came downstairs and sat across from me at the kitchen table. He looked better, more color in his face. He wrapped both hands around a coffee mug and looked out the window at the backyard. Was Nadine in that group chat? He asked. I didn't answer right away. Nathan, just tell me, yes. Her name was on the thread. He nodded slowly. He kept looking out the window. I watched him process it. I could see the exact moment the last piece landed for him, the way his jaw shifted slightly and his shoulders settled. She knew the whole time, he said. It wasn't a question. The messages were sent 10 days before the trip. She had them on her phone. He didn't say anything for a long while. Then, she never said a word to me. Not once. No, he set down the coffee mug. I want to see the full chat log. I showed him everything. He read it through once without stopping, then he went back and read it again from the beginning. When he was done, he closed the phone and put it face down on the table. Okay, he said. What do we do? That was the only conversation we needed to have. Cliff worked steadily over the next 2 weeks while Nathan recovered at my house. He recorded Brad Tanner's formal statement. He filed a preliminary complaint with the Colorado Division of Criminal Justice, citing criminal negligence causing bodily harm. He contacted a financial crimes investigator at the state level regarding the concealed debt in the Ashby Company accounts. He also reached out quietly to a business journalist at a Denver publication named Lorraine Kettner, who had already been investigating Gerald Ashby's company over a separate matter involving a disputed public works contract. Cliff didn't hand her the full story. He just made sure she knew to look more closely at the Ashby Family Trust and the refinancing timeline. 2 weeks after the trip, Gerald's lawyer called me. His name was Randall Mercer, and he had the voice of a man who spent his career making problems go away before they became expensive. He offered $180,000 and a non-disclosure agreement. I told him Nathan would see them in court. There was a pause on the line then. Mr. Priet, my clients have significant resources and a strong interest in resolving this privately. So do I said, and my interest is in a courtroom. Tell Gerald that I hung up. The criminal charges were filed the following week. Criminal negligence causing bodily harm. The civil fraud complaint went in 2 days after that, centered on the prenuptial agreement and the concealed financial records. The Denver Journalist story on the public works contract ran the same week, and in the body of that story was a single line noting that Gerald Ashby was the subject of an ongoing criminal investigation. She had found that on her own, we had just made sure the timing gave it the most weight. The Ashby name, which had meant something in certain Denver business circles, started meaning something different very quickly. The trial was set for September 2024. In the months between February and then, things moved fast. Gerald gave an interview to a local business publication in March. He called the incident a misunderstanding that had been blown out of proportion by a family dispute. He said Nathan had overreacted. He said the charges were retaliatory. He was calm and composed and smiled at the right moments. That interview did not help him. People who had done business with Gerald over the years started talking. Not publicly at first, just quietly, the way people do when they suddenly feel safe enough to say what they already knew. 2 contractors reached out to Cliff independently with their own accounts of Gerald using pressure tactics in business negotiations. A former employee of the Ashby Company contacted the state financial investigator about bookkeeping irregularities she had noticed before she left her job. By the time summer came, Gerald had lost 2 major construction contracts. His company's bonding capacity was under review. The Cherry Hills house was still there, but the watch had stopped appearing in photographs. Nathan went back to work in April. His knee had healed properly by then. He moved back to his apartment in Boulder. He called me every Sunday, which was something he had always done but felt more deliberate now. We didn't talk about the case much on those calls. We talked about his work, about what he was cooking, about nothing in particular. It was good to hear his voice every week and know he was steady. He never reached out to Nadine after that morning at my kitchen table. She tried to contact him twice in the weeks after the trip. He didn't respond. He told me once that he didn't have anything left to say to her, that the group chat messages had said everything that needed to be said. I didn't push him on it. That was his decision to make. The trial opened on a Tuesday in September. I sat in the gallery behind Nathan and Cliff for all 3 days. The prosecutor assigned to the case was a woman named Lorraine Kettner. Not the journalist, a different Lorraine. She was methodical and precise in the way that good prosecutors are, the kind who don't need theatrics because the evidence does the work for them. She opened by walking the jury through the highway camera footage, timestamp by timestamp. She put the screenshots on the screen at the front of the courtroom and let them speak. The SUV pulling in, Nathan getting out, the SUV leaving. Nathan alone in the dark, moving toward the highway, visible in passing headlights. An hour of that, then she read the group chat messages aloud. The courtroom was very quiet while she did it. Gerald, he's still refusing to sign. This is becoming a real problem for the timeline. Sylvia, he needs a stronger push. Words aren't working. Philip, same approach we used with Brad Tanner. Gerald, yes, once he's rattled, he'll sign anything or he'll walk. Either outcome works for us. She read Howard Beckett's message too. Gerald, just be careful. If this goes wrong, it's not just the deal. She paused after that one. Let it sit. Brad Tanner testified on the second day. He was straightforward and specific. He described the cabin outside Steamboat Springs, the night they left him, the 8-kilometer walk in October cold to the nearest town. He described the phone call from Gerald the following week, the quiet mention of the breach of contract lawsuit that would follow if Brad said anything publicly. He said he had stayed quiet because he believed Gerald would follow through. Dr. Pauline Greer testified about Nathan's condition on admission. She was precise about the medical details, the hypothermia staging, the re-injury to the surgical site, the timeline of risk. She told the court what she had told me that night. Another hour in those conditions with his mobility limitation, on a highway with that traffic speed. She said it plainly and without dramatizing it. She didn't need to. Cliff testified about the prenuptial agreement. He walked through page 4, paragraph 11, explaining the clause in plain language for the jury. He explained what the Ashby Company's financial records showed, the concealed debt, the refinancing deadline 14 months out, the way the trust access clause aligned with that timeline. He had the documents to back every word of it. Gerald took the stand on the afternoon of the second day. He wore a dark suit and a careful expression. He said the rest stop had been poorly handled. He said he took responsibility for the confusion. He said the prenup was standard family protection language that had been mischaracterized. He said Brad Tanner's account was exaggerated. Lorraine asked him about page 4, paragraph 11. She asked him to explain in plain language what right that clause gave him over Nathan's finances after 12 months of marriage. He said it was a standard trustee provision. She asked him again specifically, what does it allow you to do with Nathan's money? He looked at his lawyer. His lawyer did not help him. He said he would need to consult the document again. She handed him the document. He read it. The courtroom waited. He said he believed it had been written more broadly than intended. Lorraine let that answer sit in the room for a moment. Then she moved on. Sylvia did not testify. Philip testified briefly and added very little. Howard Beckett testified that he had advised Gerald against the trip and had not been present. His message in the group chat made that particular claim difficult to sustain under cross-examination. Closing arguments finished on the afternoon of the third day. Justice Harriet Lund told both sides she would return with a verdict the following morning. Justice Harriet Lund had been on the bench for over 20 years. She was in her late 50s, the kind of judge who ran a quiet courtroom not because she demanded it, but because people instinctively gave it to her. When she came in the next morning, her expression was the same as it had been every day of the trial. Steady, unreadable. She settled into her seat, looked at her notes for a moment, then looked up at the courtroom. I have presided over many cases in my career, she said. Cases involving violence, fraud, negligence of every kind. What I find most difficult to excuse is not the impulsive act, but the calculated one. The kind that is planned in advance, discussed in a group chat, and then executed on a man recovering from surgery on a mountain highway in February. She looked at Gerald Ashby. Mr. Ashby, you have presented this to the court as a misunderstanding. The evidence does not support that characterization. You planned this. You communicated the plan in writing. You coordinated your family around it. You had done something nearly identical to another man 2 years prior and faced no consequence for it. That prior incident did not give you pause. It gave you confidence. Gerald sat very still. What you did to Nathan Pruitt was not a prank. It was not a joke that went too far. It was a deliberate act carried out against a man with a documented physical limitation in life-threatening conditions for the purpose of financial coercion. The fact that it did not kill him does not reduce what it was intended to be. She handed down the sentences without theatrics. Gerald Ashby received 18 months, suspended after 6 months with 3 years probation and a permanent restraining order keeping him away from Nathan. Sylvia received 2 years, suspended after 8 months. Philip received 1 year, suspended after 3 months. Howard Beckett received probation and community service for his failure to act despite prior knowledge. The civil case was heard separately 2 months later. Nathan was awarded $1.1 million in damages. The Colorado financial regulators completed their audit of the Ashby Company that winter. They found the concealed debt, confirmed it, and identified additional irregularities going back 4 years. Gerald lost his contractor's license. The company shut down by spring. The house in Cherry Hills went on the market in March. Nadine was not charged. I don't know what she told herself in the months that followed. I don't know if she believed she had been protecting Nathan somehow, or if she had simply looked away and decided not to know. What I know is that she had the group chat on her phone for 10 days before that trip. She read those messages. She went to sleep every night knowing what her father had planned, and she never said a word to the man she had agreed to marry. Nathan never had to make a formal statement about ending the engagement. The facts made the statement for him. He bought a condo in Boulder with part of the settlement. He went back to work at the hospital. His knee healed fully by summer. He got a promotion to lead technician in the fall. When he told me about it on one of our Sunday calls, he sounded like himself again, settled, calm, the way he had always been before any of this started. Cliff came over for dinner most Sundays now. The three of us sat around the kitchen table, ate whatever Nathan had decided to cook that week, and talked about nothing important. It was good. It was exactly what it was supposed to be. I think about that night sometimes, February 14th. The drive out on I-70, hands tight on the wheel, not knowing what I was going to find. The gas station lights coming into view. Walking through the door and seeing Nathan on the floor with his leg out and that gray color in his face. I spent 30 years building infrastructure. Bridges, highway systems, drainage. You learn in that work that the most dangerous failures are the ones that look stable on the outside. The structure that passes every visual inspection until the day the wrong load comes along and it gives way. Gerald Ashby looked solid. Confident handshakes, the right words, a big house in Cherry Hills. Underneath, there was $380,000 of concealed debt and a plan to use my son's marriage to cover it. Cliff always said the same thing about bad contracts. The problem is never where they want you to look. It is always on page 4. He was right about that. If you're watching this and something feels off about the people coming into your family, trust that feeling. You're not overreacting. You're not being difficult. That instinct has been right a lot longer than any smooth talker has been wrong. Pay attention to what people do when they think no one is building a case. Pay attention to page 4. The bond Gerald Ashby was testing that night on I-70 had been built over 31 years. It did not bend, it did not break, and neither did we.